any of the detail, it'll all be available to you after this. I'd like to, as I say, start by thanking you all very much indeed for joining us. And I'd also particularly like to thank B13, who have made this possible. They have sponsored the Tech Transformation Challenge that we've been running for the last few months, and have been supporting a range of different organizations that have got involved both through walkabouts and also, of course, through the Amity Path community as well. So a big shout out and thanks to B13, and of course to all of you as well for coming along. I'm going to highlight or spotlight Martin now, and I'm going to ask him if he will introduce himself and just tell us who it is we're about to hear from in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thank you, Ben, and great to meet you all. It's lovely to have the opportunity to speak. I guess perhaps where Ben would have or originally to haul me in to do this talk to you, I had the privilege to serve as West Midlands Tech Commissioner, reported into then Mayor Sir Andy Street, as he is now, for a couple of years. That was very good in terms of giving me a perspective across the whole technology landscape. But just as a brief summary, I've spent my entire career in the software space, so it's almost 40 years, I have to say. It sort of pains me to say that, but almost 40 years, during which time we've seen a lot of change. I've worked for some of the great and the good, Oracle, SAP, Fujitsu, although they're perhaps less good these days, but some of the great and the good. I've also been a co-founder several times, and I've been through full venture cycles through to exit, very different experience. And I now spend my life working with early stage scale-up ventures, one of which happens to be B13, helping them to boost their growth. I'm also a multiple angel investor, so I've been through the pain and joy of investing in startups. That's a topic if anyone wants to talk about, I'd be delighted to do that. And spend a lot of time working with my son as well in his edtech startup. So I've seen lots in the tech sector, very actively involved in it, and the broader SME marketplace in terms of the use of technology. So that's me, Ben. I hope that's a reasonable summary.
That certainly is, Martin. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for making this time available for us as well.
Pleasure.
So one of the things that I'm going to ask everyone to do is start to think about the questions they would like to put to Martin, and a little bit later on in the conversation I'll open up the floor. But in the meantime, I just wanted to see if we can go straight to the central proposition of this conversation. We're trying to help people to be well prepared to make technology and technology investment decisions through 2026. So can I just start by asking you, please, just to tell us what you think matters most to set the scene for the 2026 tech landscape?
Sure. I mean, that's quite a nuanced question. So I'm going to assume I'm talking here both to SMEs who maybe utilize technology and perhaps some founders, and also perhaps even some tech businesses. But so let me try to make sure there's something in this for everyone. But I guess if I look at the tech landscape itself from a pure technology point of view, what's important? I think what we're going to see in 2026. There's the inevitable AI bubble that at some point I'd be shocked if it didn't burst. Who knows what the implications are going to be? But having been around for the last one with the dot-com boom, we can expect quite a lot of turbulence. So that's on the horizon. And also the rise of agentic AI, which some of you may be familiar with, but this is essentially AI being autonomous in terms of the way it can act, which potentially is another game changer on top of all of the generative AI stuff we've had. And the final bit on AI is I think we'll start to see domain-specific large language models pop up as well. So things like law and education, accounting, etc., which will imply more change. Robotics is another one. We're starting to see this bubble away now. I mean, we've got lots happening with drones, with autonomous cars, but also human form robots are starting to become very smart. And we'll see that breakthrough, I think. And also quantum computing that we're starting to see a lot more and hear a lot more about. So as always, there's a ton going on in the technology landscape to create disruption. But what does it all mean, really? So if you look through the lens of small businesses, I think my biggest single thing for 2026 would be don't get caught up in all the AI hype. lead with a question, not the answer. So I see lots of instances where companies are saying, okay, what can AI do for me? And that's not an invalid question, but don't get caught up in that the answer's AI. Now what's the question? So I've seen lots of examples with companies trying to shoehorn AI into problems that aren't really suited for AI at all, and that's not necessarily a very good thing. And I think also for small businesses is focus on digitalization. That this, in a sense, is the boring stuff that we've been trying to do for 20 years. But the fact is, less than half of SMEs have even got a basic level of digitalization, and it can have a massive impact on productivity, competitiveness, customer service. And a lot of companies I talk to haven't even got the basics of that in place. So it's a matter of walking before you can run. So digitalization, sort of back to basics, is really important. And the final bit for SMEs would be to try to do some work around culture, on developing an innovation culture, because the world is going to get more disrupted, not less. And you need to be able to run at this speed, and that's not going to change. And so developing culture to intercept that over time is going to be very valuable. So that's SMEs. And I guess if I turn to founders, and particularly sort of people building businesses with a tech thread, whether they're software or not, same sort of message. Don't get caught up in the hype. That I see lots of examples of founders who build AI solutions because they can, whereas really it's all about solving problems. And if you're not fundamentally solving a problem, eventually you're either not going to get funded, or you're going to get caught out, and you're not going to be able to really create value. Another point, leverage technology to grow fast. So there's tons of stuff that technology and AI can do on scaling pipeline, on marketing, on delivering great customer service. And we see now businesses grow very fast without needing lots of hiring. Now you can argue whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but from a founder's point of view, it's potentially a good thing, because it means you can scale fast with a small cost base. And the final thing would be to pick the technology very carefully. So we've got, I'm sure you've all heard of vibe coding, is a mode of using AI to quickly generate minimum viable products. We've got low code, no code. And we're also starting to see something called specification driven software engineering, which really, the problem with the vibe coding approach is that it will let you get to market quickly, but it won't create an industrial strength solution that will see you grow. So you'll almost certainly have to re-platform. So it can look great, but actually it doesn't necessarily take you very far. What specification driven software engineering will let you do is develop enterprise class solutions quick and fast, which gives you a foundation to really build a business on. So be careful about being seduced by some of the things we hear about what AI can do. It can get you to market quickly, but it won't necessarily sustain you going forwards. So Ben, that will be some of the themes that I would have for people on my radar over the coming year.
Thank you, Martin. That was fantastic. And I'd like just to pause for a second to single out James and thank you for the first question in the chat. Please do. I'm very conscious we've got a very distinguished group of people in the audience, so to speak, here. So please don't hold back. Questions very welcome. Comments, suggestions, and perspectives also welcome. And we'll try to cover those later on. I'll also ask people to put their hands up if they want to present their questions live a little bit later on to keep Martin on his toes. So if you want to give him an advance warning, put it in the chat. If you want to try and surprise him.
I'm reading it now. Thank you, James. that question's about a 2-hour discussion its own right. I mean, look, having been West Midlands Tech Commissioner for a couple of years, I started off thinking, look, it's government's job to create all the conditions for startups to succeed and to lead the way. I've changed my mind on that significantly. I think there are many things that government can do to help, but essentially the private sector is going to lead the way. So government initiatives are always welcome. I mean, in fact, I think we said we weren't going to get into the budget, Ben, but there are certain things in the budget that are designed to stimulate availability of funding, certainly for slightly later stage companies, not so much for startups. But at the end of the day, essentially, I would not be going looking for government and NGOs to fix things, unless, of course, you have the sort of IP-rich business which is suitable for grant funding. Then that can be a big help from the non-governmental, the NGO and government sector. But broadly speaking, if you're a startup, you're going to have to do it yourself. The private sector is there to support in many, many ways. And if you can take bits of government help, take what you can get, but I wouldn't be sitting back and relying on it for sure. Now, I don't know whether that was the thrust you were coming from, but feel free to follow that up.
And the flip side, I guess, in terms of how can government operate better? So I've been involved in different accelerators and catapults and things like that.
Okay.
And there's lots of great people involved, but it seems like it hits a wall at some point in terms of the impact that it can have. And obviously funding is always going to be limited, but actually being a catalyst for more innovation.
Let's come to that. If we may, James, can we develop that a little later on in the conversation?
Sorry. I've got some very specific thoughts on that. In fact, I delivered a presentation on that very topic last week. So if that's the angle you want to cover, let's come back to that then, because I'll give you a very clear view on the role I think government can have in catalysing the startup economy, for sure.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
We will we'll have time to go into some of the specifics later, but if we stay general now, I should say, of course, that this conversation is our opportunity to convene, but we can continue the conversation. Indeed, we have the Tech Transformation Chat WhatsApp group, which I think you are all members, where we can carry on any element of this. So if you feel you have unfinished business at the end of this call, don't worry, there will be plenty of opportunity to follow up. Martin, I'm just going to, if I may, bring you back to something you said a little earlier on. You described, and we're talking now particularly with founders in mind, and also intrapreneurs, SMEs that are looking at making that digitization transformation that you described. And you mentioned specifically specification-driven software engineering. I wonder if you could you mentioned that was a sort of enterprise level approach that's now available to earlier stage and indeed smaller SMEs. So can you just sort of kind of explain how someone who is new to this should approach, if you like, those tech decisions in 2026 in the light of this new opportunity of software-driven software engineering?
Yeah. So I think that the point is what specification-driven software engineering does is it makes the actual creation of the technology, of good quality technology, a lot more accessible and cost-effective. So effectively, you can put your time and effort into working out what it is you need, and then the creation of the tech doesn't have to take a long time or cost an absolute fortune. So it's very much sort of have your cake and eat it. So you can have it fast, you can have it cheap, and you can also have it high quality, which has always been sort of the holy grail. So I guess my advice would be, it's to sort of start with the business case and your desired outcomes. Forget the technology, because the technology is becoming cheaper, as it were. It's becoming a lot more, the promise is it becomes a lot more commoditized in terms of the creation of the technology. So it's really start by putting the effort into really truly what are we trying to achieve here. And when I talk to a lot of whether entrepreneurs or founders, it doesn't matter, anyone planning to do things with technology, often they already have a view in their mind as to what they want the technology to do. And it's better to step right back and go right back to the business case, but then to be open to different ways of approaching the problem. So for example, I was with a manufacturer quite recently, an SME, wanted to do something to actually help their customers and to improve the way their pipeline comes into the business. And actually, when we explored it, what he was planning on doing would have created friction for customers. And it was a real need to step back and think about what are you absolutely trying to do. And the message really here is, what my advice would be, put the effort into getting the specification right, because the technology itself is getting easier to produce. With specification-driven software engineering, it will become a lot cheaper to produce the high quality. And so the more effort you put into getting right up front what you actually want and being really clear, whatever the technology looks like, this is what we want this solution to do, this is why we want this, these are the parameters and the constraints it's got to have, and then let the technologists do their job. It means you don't get caught up in the capabilities of the technology, and you don't try to work your problem or opportunity around the tech itself. You say what you need to achieve, and you put the challenge for the technologists to create the technology to suit it. And with specification-driven software engineering, that will get amplified. So you can afford to spend more of the time on working out what you really want, because you don't have to worry so much about the creation of the technology. But if there's one overriding message, it's put the time and effort in up front to get the specification right. That will pay dividends down the track. And hopefully before too long, you'll be able to just squash that specification into an AI engine, and out the end will pop the solution.
Super. Thank you very much indeed. And now you and I met about 18 months ago when I was doing a piece of work for the West Midlands Combined Authority, and you were the West Midlands Tech Commissioner. And that was focusing very much on AI and AI adoption. And particularly, but not exclusively, for SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises. So I just wanted to dwell a little bit longer on those organizations which are already up and running, but which are contemplating a pivot or a transformation using technology in the course of the next year. Specifically for them, of course, they have all sorts of legacy. Perhaps they have tech debt. Perhaps they have processes which are quite hard to transform. So I wonder if you could just spend a moment on your advice for them and the particular challenges they face.
I mean, again, I think I would come back to the theme of don't start with, the answers AI, it's a panacea and it's going to solve all my problems and it's going to do it easily. I mean, I'm sure many of you will have seen the report from MIT recently, which showed something like 95% of AI initiatives haven't delivered value. Now, that might be partly because there's so many initiatives, but what it says is it comes back to it is a truism that you can have whatever technology you want. If people don't adopt it, if it doesn't fit into your organization, if the processes don't work, then it's not going to get adopted and you're not going to see the business benefit from it. So I guess, it's true that even though we have this wonderful new tooling called AI that can do some amazing things, you shouldn't necessarily start with that or assume that it's going to be easy just because of the way ChatGPT might make things easy. But what would I be doing? I'd be keeping abreast of what's going on in my industry. So do a bit of research on what the bleeding edge of your industry is doing, because then there will be people who are taking the pain. They're often bigger companies that small companies can't afford, and use their learning experiences and understand the state of the art in your industry. Be prepared to experiment, but experiment in a measured way. So, I wouldn't see any SME saying, hey, we're just going to AI enable the business tomorrow. Where I've seen successful initiatives, they've started off in a very managed way with a relatively small, tight experiment, and then they've broadened out and taken the learnings. Because the problem is there's no real rule book for how you get value from AI. So you've got to learn on as you go. So actually being prepared to experiment and to try things and then to build on that goodness and build out is almost certainly the way to do this. And the other thing I would do is many SMEs do have off-the-shelf software, whether it's standard stuff from Microsoft and Google, or whether it's applications that run their business. Look at what those AI providers are doing, because they're investing millions and millions in AI enabling their software, and it might well be that you can achieve your objectives by piggybacking off the investment that they're making. What I wouldn't do is start with AI as the answer. Now, what we're going to do, and I see so many businesses doing this. I was talking to a manufacturer a couple of weeks ago that wanted to improve or wanted a smart way of actually estimating, and they were trying to apply AI to this. And actually, it was what we call a deterministic problem. So it's something that you can work it out mechanically from A to B. You do not need AI. And there's a good chance AI will give you a less than optimal answer, because it's a statistical answer rather than a factual answer. And so they were trying to apply AI because that's the path they'd been led down with all the hype, and they'd started at the wrong end. They'd started with the technology. So I would say go into it with open mind, be prepared to experiment, do your research on what's going on in your industry, what other companies around you are doing. But don't just jump into the technology and apply it in a liberal sense, because you probably won't get the answers that you want.
Fantastic, thank you. And in light of what you've just said, I think Adrian's put a question into the chat, which is perhaps topical, about how you should approach the fact that the rate of change of what's on offer is so fast. Do you think, Adrian, would you be happy just to either to share that with us in person, to speak it, so that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
I'm talking from a purely a sort of practical example. In the last 6 months, I worked with a large e-commerce company in the food space on something which didn't necessarily have to do with AI. It was more around CRMs and stuff like this. But by the time we put a process in place of choosing it and looking at how it will be integrated, and very important, adopting it, because I think a lot of companies do conflate deployment with adoption.
Yeah.
And that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Things have changed. So in every board meeting I have with them, someone comes up and said, well, I heard about that company that has created a CRM that uses AI, blah, blah, blah. So very often, as I said, you're building what you want right now with one eye looking at what's coming. And especially in the sort of models space, they are constantly evolving, which makes it very difficult.
I mean, I think that's true. I mean, AI models are evolving constantly, but few businesses operate purely off AI models, right? I mean, if you do have a business that does that, then you're in for a lot of change and excitement, and possibly that has upsides and downsides depending on your business. I guess what I would say is that whatever pace technology changes, that's very different to the rate at which benefits are realized. And actually, technology changes so fast, but people and organizations can only absorb technology at a certain pace. And that's what governs the pace of development. And so I think it's possible to sort of be carried away by, okay, this technology is changing, we've got to keep up to speed. And this is where, at the end of the day, if you come back to fundamentals and say, what drives value in our business, what constitutes customer success and customer value, and how can we leverage technology for that? Now, if there's a development in technology that means you can genuinely make a step change in your productivity, in competitiveness and customer service, then sure, go adopt that. But just because technology enhances doesn't mean that it's going to deliver value to you, and doesn't mean that that technology itself is going to deliver value. It just means it's capable of doing it. So I would advocate for keeping an eye on what technology is doing, but really concentrating on getting the fundamentals in place. So, this statistic that something like 80-90% of SME leaders believe that digitalization delivers value, and the evidence is they grow faster than companies that are purely manual, etc. But actually, they still haven't put the technology in place, so they haven't got the fundamentals. And those, just putting the basics in place, would make a proportionately bigger difference than chasing the latest technology. So I would say, technology is going to continue to change. We'll be talking about quantum this time next year, and then we'll be talking about robotics, and it's all valuable stuff, but the world doesn't change as fast as technology does. So I would say you've got to divorce yourself a little bit from the hype of the technology and go back to what constitutes value in your business, because what you want to be moving forwards all the time is value in your business.
Thank you very much indeed.
I would approach that. Yeah.
I'm just going to turn in a moment to Sohan and Gabby for questions with hands up, but just to give you a bit of advance warning, Martin, after we've had those two questions, I'm going to ask you to share your reflections on organization and leadership and culture, as well as ecosystem, because you've alluded to the importance of those. So we will come back to some general observations from you on that. But first, Sohan, perhaps we can turn to you, and then Gabby after you.
Someone on mute?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, Martin. Thank you.
Hi.
I'd just like to blue sky this, I guess. I'm wondering about possibilities and like potential for perhaps even an industry of mistake knowledge diffusion, like, say someone like AI, like specifically within the context of AI, like someone has probably made this kind of mistake before, or someone has found out that this AI doesn't really work for this application in this particular way, and how to get that to people who might be thinking about trying that, and even possibly like dedicated, deliberate mistake makers in a sense, if that makes any sense. Just people who like maybe even providers who just look for ways to apply AI to certain contexts or applications, and I mean, they might find it works, and sometimes they may find it doesn't work, and then they can make that something that is sellable to people, like the document exactly how it didn't work, and perhaps even make an industry of that. What do you think?
Well, of course, I mean, there's a burgeoning AI consultancy industry, which will certainly purport to make money out of telling you how to do it, and presumably they are learning from mistakes as to how not to do it. But I think sort of the flip side of that, how can you benefit from things that are out there. I think networking and researching quite widely so you get a sense of what's going on out there is good. I mean, people will sometimes share with you what doesn't work. Not everybody's prepared to do that. I mean, back to the earlier point about government, I think this is also an area where government has a role to play on creating sort of forums, putting in investment to stimulate experimentation, to try things that work and don't work, so that we can edge the argument forwards. Because, you know, just because we can do something with technology doesn't mean we can capture the benefit in practice. So I don't think there's an obvious answer to that, other than, yes, I agree with you. It would be nice if we had that. You'll pick some of that up from conferences. You'll pick it up from having a network of your peers and groups like, I think, you know, we've got this tech transformation WhatsApp group that I'm sure people are prepared to share in as well. You know, in terms of an industry, I suspect the consulting industry will be all over this one, because they know it's a problem people have got. Whether they can truly solve it or not is another matter.
Thank you very much.
I mean, in the sense,
go ahead.
Well, just to follow up, I mean, but the thing is, when government, or let's say a private player as well, might fund experimentation, it would be good if that includes the complete documentation of the experimentation, and not just like, here's the money, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but you also have to report back as to how it doesn't work, and make that something that is publicly accessible. It would, I mean, especially if it's the government that's funding it.
The challenge is that often they're doing it for competitive advantage, so they're typically not going to share that. They might share it in a closed forum, but yeah, I take the point. It would be nice, wouldn't it? I mean, we did a bit of B13 did a bit of research actually with the Greater Birmingham Chambers, where we asked people to talk about challenges they'd had on deploying projects, and we were surprised actually how many were quite happy to talk about that in a structured way. But it's not something that always people are prepared to talk about. So, but I take your point.
I think without waiting for government, we can, and indeed the purpose of the Tech Transformation Group is to point to ways to approaches like B13's venture mapping, which give you the ability to conduct research and explore the possibility of an approach without taking significant risk, learning fast and relatively low cost. And I hope also people will feel comfortable sharing what went wrong in the 95% of times when they didn't receive a positive return. But Gabby, can I turn to you?
I couldn't work out how to lower my hand, because my point, actually, we kind of moved on from it. It was linked to Adrian, but I'll share it in that I think that you make a good point, Adrian, but actually maybe that's exactly why it's really important to map the potential and that blue sky thinking, because actually if you've mapped it, you know what data you need to collect now to be able to build something for the future. And I definitely think an observation is linked to what you're saying, Martin. There's lots of businesses that are being seduced by the concept and the idea of AI, but actually if you haven't digitally transformed and you haven't got the data, the correct data in the right way, actually you're limited with your options. So that unsexy bit of digitally transforming and collecting the right data might not feel as transformative, but actually that's laying the foundations to mean that we can unlock all this other stuff in the future, but not getting seduced by that idea of a shiny penny, but actually looking inward of what are we actually fundamentally trying to achieve as a business, what are the bottlenecks. And I like that someone shared recently about almost looking at your ratio, looking at who does what over and over again that's manually. If I could free that up and reinvest that time elsewhere, possibly towards doing a better job for my customers, spending more time with customers. But that was just linking that. It was going back a point, but linking to what you said, Adrian.
I think that's why it's important that that we spend the time looking at what are we trying to achieve, what do we really need technology to do for us, where's it going to add value, and then we go to implement it. We start off with a preset view, we might well implement technology that causes more of a problem than it solves. And I think so. You touched on venture mapping, Ben. Investing the time to actually work out, right, what are we really trying to achieve? What might this look like? What fundamentally are our customers and our operations looking for? Is time well spent? And if you don't do that and you have to come back and undo the technology, the cost escalates a lot further down the process. So it's a hell of a lot cheaper to do that in advance than it is to do it once you've implemented something or tried to implement something.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And this is notice to everyone else as well. Please do get your questions into the chat, and we'll come to those in a moment. But just to return, if we may, Martin, to leadership, organization, culture, and the sort of the community around the organization, the ecosystem, if you like. I know that you've given a lot of thought to this and you speak regularly about it. So can you give us your insights into how to approach leadership specifically in this time of tech transformation?
Sure. I mean, I think if you look at, say over the last, I don't know, take 20, 50 years, what we've had is like periods of intense change and then plateaus and periods of change and plateaus. And you've at least had a chance to catch your breath before you move on to the next change. And this is what's really happening with the pace of technology, with this sort of exponential change that we still see going on, and it's not going to stop anytime soon. You have this sort of constant period of change. There's never a chance to stop and catch your breath. There's always things changing. And I think at the end of the day, you can almost go back to Darwin, actually, that it's not the strongest that survive, it's the most adaptable. And so the real if you're going to focus on anything at all other than implementing technology, to my mind, it's focusing on the culture and the way your business operates, so that you can develop what I would call an innovation culture. And what this means is developing a healthy curiosity around new ideas, that every time you come into contact with a customer, every time you implement a process, every time you get a certain result, there's an opportunity to be curious about the result you got and how can we improve this, even if it's little micro improvements. And often it's the people on the ground who see these things, and it's senior managers who aren't necessarily always open to it, but developing this sort of a culture of curiosity where new ideas are welcomed, where there is a constant stream of experiments on how to improve things. Sometimes there'll be big improvements, sometimes little improvements, but nonetheless, just being tireless about wanting to improve things, not stand still. And coming alongside that is got to be a tolerance for mistakes as well. Now, you can carry on making the same mistake, and then clearly that's not good. But what I see is organizations that do have this innovation culture are tolerant of where they try things, and it's okay that something doesn't work. As long as you knew what you were doing, you did it for the right reasons, and you learn from it as soon as it doesn't go right, and you understood the risks in doing it, then mistakes in a sense are a good thing. And if you look at some of the great and the good, like Amazon, their story, they do so many experiments and they throw away a lot of what they actually invent and create. But that means they're doing enough experiments to find the things that really do work. And it's not a problem for them to stop something that doesn't work, even if they put a lot of money into it, because they tried it, it didn't work, and they know that other things will. And what comes with that is empowering people. And I would say perhaps one of the biggest things, certainly for SMEs, is trying to create this environment of safety, psychological safety for people, so that the people on the front line in particular are prepared to put their hand up, say, "Excuse me, sir, I think we could do this better." And then they're empowered to go make the improvement, because if people are empowered, then they will rise to the level at which they're treated. And just creating this learning culture, this is something that you'll hear Satya Nadella talk about as the transformation of Microsoft. Really is turning it from a knowing organization into a learning organization. And I think that also applies to SMEs, that if you approach your business as it's a process of constant improvement, trying things, failing at things, improving the ways things work, you'll get light bulb moments, you'll get breakthrough, but you'll be constantly moving forwards. And this is what we need in this world where technology is constantly disrupting things. The opportunity to do things better is also there. So if you can create this innovation culture, you're probably in the best possible situation that you can be, to be able to spot trends, to be able to move your business forwards, and to absorb useful technology when it does come along. So I would be a big advocate of thinking about the culture in your business. And I'd say that's not a normal mindset for a small business. It's often the mindset, say, for startups, because they have no choice when they're finding product market fit to go on that journey. Once you've got product market fit, often what happens is businesses say, okay, we've got there now, we've reached this plateau, we never have to change again. And if you're running, you know, an SME in a traditional industry, often there's a way it's done and you don't change. But actually, if you develop this innovation culture, you can constantly move forwards. And I think that those will be the businesses that will be best placed for the future. It'll be the ones who just have at a cultural, they can move at the speed of culture is what I talk about. You know, they don't have to wait to be forced to do something. They're on to change constantly. And that's the sort of mindset that we're going to need in this highly disrupted exponential world.
Thank you. That is that's a call to arms if ever I heard one. So you're encouraging people to move at the speed of culture, to turn from being a knowing to a learning organization, possibly even a knowing to a learning leader. I wonder if we can pull all of that together before opening up to general questions. I'm you know, there is so much that you've covered, and I know there is so much more you could cover. So I'm going to ask you to be incredibly reductive now. And if you were to be perhaps advising, I was about to say a younger version of yourself, but of course your son,
a much younger version of myself.
Well, yeah. Your son is a much younger and super dynamic, perhaps not version of yourself, but I know there'll be a family resemblance. So when you're advising someone in his position, someone who is perhaps at that stage where they are absolutely sort of wrestling with change and enthusiastically embracing the possibility of it, what is your guidance to him? What would you say to him? And then I'm going to ask an additional question rolled in with this, which is if he has a perhaps a little bit more cautious friend, how would you encourage them to take the first steps to following his, what I know to be a stellar trajectory?
Yeah. Well, it is a tough question to be very reductive about, but I would say, just to finish off, you know, the points we talked about last, pace of change is only going to increase, so become adaptable. So learn to become adaptable as a business is one exam question I would set, and that's not going to be an overnight journey, but you can absolutely change the culture of your own business and yourselves as individuals. So that's one of the things I'll be doing. I think seeing technology as an enabler and focusing on what the right questions are, not just jump straight to an answer. So being really clear on where value gets created and how technology can support that, not technology for its own sake, because customers don't care about the technology, they care about the value that gets created for them, and that's what really matters, whether you use technology or not. And in fact, I would say I've plenty of times I've advised customers not to use technology, because actually there are better solutions than using technology to fix a problem. My other points would be, make sure you take the right approach to technology. You can do great stuff with vibe coding. You can knock up solutions very quickly, and they'll let you test something in the market. And if that's what you want to do, then go for it. But if you need to build something that's operationally sustainable and of a good, robust quality, then you need to think about what at the moment is a more traditional build approach, and that's where specification driven software engineering is taking us. So building good quality software fast and cheaply, not simply putting together solutions that are they're good for MVP. So think about the quality of the technology that you need to build. And I guess my final point would be, get the foundations in first. So start with digitalization. So until you've got technology applied in a fundamental sense to your full value chain, don't start adding sizzle to it, because you need to be able to go from identifying customers through contracting, through servicing them, and all the things that go on to make that happen. And you need to be able to do that well before you start adding in bells and whistles. Otherwise, you're building on sand. So that you talked about if you're a go get it founder, you don't start with technology, you start with a problem, and you focus on the business problem 100%, and you add the technology later. You also invest to build enterprise quality technology, is what you do. If you've got a slightly more cautious friend, you might test things in the market with MVP. You might want to vibe code something. You might want to dip a toe in the water first. So there are other approaches you could take that mean you take a more staged approach to that future, rather than piling in with an enterprise investment that could possibly cost more. But yeah, that's fundamentally, Ben, what I would say my advice would be.
Brilliant, Martin. Thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm going to ask for audience questions in just a moment. So either type it into the chat or raise a hand. And if you don't, I have some questions of my own, getting a bit more specific. My aim, we've got about a quarter of an hour left to run, and my aim is to avoid getting to the question about the budget. So, please help me avoid getting to the question about the budget, unless, of course, you want to get there first.
I'd quite like to just touch on this thing that James raised about the sort of the public sector piece. I promise I won't talk about budget, Ben, but well, I could, but I won't. I mean, listen, to my mind, there's a couple of things that really the public sector can do to make a big difference. One is to have a structured ladder of financing to help businesses from startup through scale up. And I'll give you an example of this. If you look at what they do in New Jersey, in the US, which I've seen through my son's business, they have a development authority that will do right from matching angels through to matching venture capital. They'll give various tax breaks, which they can do. They even do salary replacement for people to do research and take MVPs to market. So it's like a coherent set of interventions that can scale alongside a business. The second thing I'd see for the public sector is what I call investor of first resort. So there are many things that we need to happen, and one of which is creating what I call a wealth flywheel. So self-sustaining ecosystems where you generate wealth in the ecosystem that gets ploughed back in. There are some fantastic examples from the US in particular of these flywheels when they're running, and they're just spinning off jobs and equity value that's ploughed back, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But they take a while to come to fruition because somebody's got to invest while the flywheel's getting moving, and that's something that government absolutely can do because it's hard for the private sector to do that. So there are some very specific things I think government can and should do to create fantastic ecosystems for founders to thrive. And if you want to explore that, James, I'd be more than happy to share that presentation with you, which is on that very topic.
Thank you. And Georgie, you have a hand up.
Hello. I'm what you might consider a baby founder. It's my first entrepreneurial venture.
Good for you.
Thank you. And you talked about what the foundations of AI are for small businesses. I don't think I'm clear on what do you think they are? What are these foundations that we need to be mindful of as we're then stacking on these? I'm sorry if this is like
what sector's your business in?
So the future of work and recruitment.
Okay.
So the problem is simplifying how people find jobs and opportunities as AI is disrupting the job market.
Okay.
And
right. Yeah, I got you. I mean, listen, there's a difference to the answer depending on whether it's an established business that wants to do AI or it's a new business. I would say the question you'd be asking yourself is to what extent your value proposition is enabled by AI. Now, if the basis on which you're creating value means you're offering a proposition that draws on some of the capabilities of AI, then you've got to have AI in the mix straight away, right? So my advice to you would be different to someone that's got an established business that's saying, "Oh God, I've got to put AI in." But even then, I'd say think carefully about the elements of technology you need to deliver your proposition, because it's almost certain you'll have an AI element to it, but you're still going to need probably some sort of marketplace. You're going to need somewhere for people to interact. You're going to need to be able to attract customers in. You're going to need to service them. So you will still have a layer of digital technology, which isn't about AI, and you've got to get those foundations right. Okay. So, you also could possibly use a vibe coding type approach to go spin up an MVP, to test it with some customers, to get yourself to first base. But then the chances are you'll have to come back and re-platform it to create something then that will scale. And if you hit a hot button straight away and start to scale, you might constrain the growth of your business. So you've got to think pretty carefully about the type of platform that you're sort of taking to market. I guess my final thought for you would be, you've really got to think about creating value beyond the AI, because what you're seeing is every time OpenAI or Google or whoever it is releases a new version of their latest AI models, the water level rises and a whole load of businesses get swamped. So, you know, and also to be frank, Georgia, if you're not old enough to remember the dot-com boom in 2000, but before that, everything was such and such .com. Everybody was a .com, and then all of a sudden it became very, very unsexy indeed to be .com anything, because it had negative connotations. So to give you an example, my son's business uses AI and neuroscience. We don't talk about AI. We never mention it. And the reason is because everybody's AI, and actually starting to get that little bit of a collective growing, and the risk of around capital investment in AI is, you know, it's potentially seen as an area where investment multiples and things are a little bit toppy. There's a lot of risk, there's a lot of change. So, you know, be careful about being seen as too much of an AI business. And actually make sure you are fundamentally addressing a business problem and you're addressing all the bits of it. So, you know, just make sure you're not at risk of being swamped as AI capabilities grow. Yeah. And again, example, like loads of the big AI companies have announced like study agents for students, and that's the area my son's in. But he's created a lot of value that goes way beyond that bit. So actually, there's no concern they're going to get swamped. They can easily address the question. But these are the sort of considerations I'd have if I was a startup looking at AI, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to explore those further, I'm more than happy to do that offline. Yeah.
That would be amazing. Yeah. I've
Pleasure.
probably got another 10 questions, but
that's okay. Well, founders, you know, take until somebody says you've taken enough. That's the thing to do.
Okay.
It's called hustle.
Hustle, yeah. Well, if you know Gabby and Nina, you know I'm cut from
you
the
know
same
hustle.
cloth.
Well, yeah, there you go. I know hustle.
Thank you, Georgie. And for you and for anyone else who is not already involved in this as well, we do have this tech transformation chat group, and we also have the Amity Partha community. So I'm going to share into the chat in a moment a link for those of you who are not yet registered as Amity Parthas. This is my nomination for you to join us, and you'll then get a shortcut into that WhatsApp group. So if you're not already aboard, please join us. And if you are already aboard, then of course, consider who you might want to nominate to join us as well. Both so that we can help with what you're doing, but also, of course, so that we can help avoid the 95% error rate that still haunts so many. Thank you very much. Has anyone else got any other questions? Matt, you do. I've got a couple myself, but Matt, over to you.
Yeah, it's just a follow-up question, really. Martin was talking about the difference in support in the US system. He was citing New Jersey's kind of, hand-holding, if you like, as you go up through the kind of investment ladder there. I mean, how can we make that happen here? We've got tech clusters based over in Harwell, but, you know, they're buildings, there's a little bit of interaction between people. I get a better hit rate going into my local hairdressers because there'll be people waiting and we get chatting, and, you know, I've had a better collision domain there than I've had on a tech campus. So how do we, you know, make the change over here?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and I think, you know, there are roles for all the actors in the system, but fundamentally, you know, one of the big things I think we need is place. So for example, if I take my own backyard is the Midlands, and if I landed from outer space, say London or something, and came up to Birmingham, where do I go? I could go to one of 20 places. So there's no place you go where these serendipitous connections always happen, because that's the obvious place. And if I give an example, there's a place called Capital Factory in Austin, Texas, which has got one of these wealth flywheels running, James, that I mentioned. And they've got about 800 investments. They've had a dozen unicorns, loads of IPOs and exits, and it's this massive self-sustaining flywheel. But it's in a building in downtown Austin, 3 or 4 floors of an anonymous building. But you go in and it's absolutely a hive of thriving connections and innovation, and you get funders pay to have a desk there, and you get lawyers pay to have a desk there because they're in amongst the innovation. So I think place has got to be a part of it. And then it comes, I do think that the stimulus role from the public sector is making much more structured ladders of investment available, so that you get it from one place. So, you know, they'll match angels, they'll match equity, they'll provide loans, they'll do all sorts of things, and then you can get it all from one place, whatever your stage is, and that's something the public sector can do. And the public sector can stimulate the creation of these things. So, you know, there's no reason, in my case, West Midlands Combined Authority couldn't take a lease on a nice city centre building for 5 years, kit it out and provide the basic operational funding to get a flywheel moving. That's the sort of thing that would be a lot easier for them to do than to ask an individual entrepreneur to do. So there's a role there. I think there's also a role for exited founders in playing back into the ecosystem. So you look at the PayPal mafia in Silicon Valley, you know, they've got the billions and billions of value because the people who know how to do it are investing back in the ecosystem. And you often find there's hundreds of them out there, but nobody asks them to contribute. So having a way of pulling in those exited founders. And I also think there's one of the biggest challenges is for the support ecosystem itself, because often you find the people in the support ecosystem aren't exited founders or haven't been on the journey always. And so whilst they can help with some of the theory, they can't always help with the practice. So the sort of rule I like to hear is, you know, if you can contribute customers, capital or connections, go do it. Beyond that, founders or if they've got a good bit of hustle, they'll go find out. So I think it does need a lot of different bits to come together. I think ultimately it probably needs, I mean, ideally you would have had something like the role I did have. Unfortunately, no other region has done this, but somebody with a local remit and vision to pull those pieces together, because the problem is all the bits there, but it's too disjointed. That's the real problem.
Okay, we're going to have time for, I think, possibly 1 or 2 more questions. I'm going to slip in with one myself, unless anyone wants to beat me to it. Any hands? Okay, 3, 2, 1. So, Martin, my question is about an expression I know you've used, which is engineered serendipity. I want to bunch this together and say you've described some of the things that, for example, placemakers, local authorities, and even national governments can do to improve things. I want to focus now on what people themselves can do in 2 ways. One, how can you be really good at engineering serendipity for your business, whether it's a startup or an established one? That's question 1. And question 2, which I think is related to that, is what is it that you should be doing as a startup at the moment? Which, if you like, what's the low-hanging fruit? Where do you see sectors or types of company which you think have got a really graspable opportunity, but you think maybe it just needs a few people to have the courage to step forward?
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I think it's one of the challenges of serendipity is it's serendipitous. So where does it happen? You never know. So I think as an early stage company, you have to be prepared to invest some of your time in things that you don't know what the result's going to be, particularly meeting people. And Walkabout's a good example of that, actually, that it's a box of chocolates, right? You never know quite what you're going to get, but you might find the one connection that springboards you to somewhere else. And if you're not in the room, then you don't get that. So for me, the biggest single thing is investing in your network. And I don't mean becoming a professional networker. So there's some people who their whole job is, you know, they become just networkers. I don't mean that at all. But I'm a passionate believer that your network has value and creates those serendipitous connections for you. So see your personal network as something to invest in and be prepared to pay it forwards as well. So in my experience, if you help people, you know, everyone on this call will have unique capabilities, skills, knowledge, and the more you're prepared to share that with other people and not expect anything in return, the more your network will give back to you. So I think there's a lot as individuals we can do. And also what I would say, go find out who are the super connectors. So when I became West Midlands Tech Commissioner, although I've lived here all my life, I didn't really know that much about the tech ecosystem because I'd always worked abroad or in London. By meeting half a dozen people, I knew everybody, because there are some people who are super connectors in every geographic region. Also, to your point, in every industry, there's one person who knows everybody. If you can identify those few super connectors and get to them, then that will get you 90% of the way into an ecosystem. So that's what I'd be recommending. I mean, in terms of specific industries, goodness me, it's difficult to say because technology is changing so fast. I mean, there's obviously huge innovation afoot in the med tech space is one at the moment. I mean, defense technology would be another one that tends to be, you know, seen as something a bit left of field. But it's going to be an area where there's a lot of investment going in, and there's huge amounts of money available and swilling around in that space for investment as well. And then, you know, come a bit closer to home, professional services is going through massive disruption because it's knowledge intensive industries. So we're seeing legal, we're seeing consulting services being hugely upended, and some really good scale up businesses coming out of those. So, you know, one that it comes to mind that was actually the founders were Midlands based, AutoGen AI. They basically they will draft responses to complex bids. Amazing technology. They're growing like Topsy as a scale up and winning awards left, right, and centre. And so they're capitalising on what AI can do in an area that's really problematic, i.e., the amount of time and effort and the win rate in these areas to add real value. So, you know, I think anything professional services is interesting as well. So there's so much. You're not. I think the point is, Ben, we're at a point where technology is ceasing to become a limiting factor. So it's almost go back to basics, find a real problem, and then just it's almost inconceivable the technology won't be there to fix that problem unless it's something like time travel, which I think Matt might be able to do with that graphic behind him. But other than that, you know, if it's a problem, it can be solved, and technology can do it probably. So concentrate on the problem.
You must. I was just about to say you must be psychic. I start a new gig tomorrow, which is quantum time transfer.
Well, well, as soon as we can fix that one, I want to invest in that business, please.
Thank you very much
indeed. I don't want an MVP. I'd quite like industrial scale technology that's well thought through from day one, please.
Well, let's not start on quantum at this late hour, but that's for another day. Thank you very much indeed. If I may, I'm just going to ask Adrian to share a last word, or perhaps 40 words, just in light of what you've added as a comment. Could you just explain what you meant there? That'd be very kind. It looks very topical.
It's it's a book I came across recently. I'm listening to a very interesting podcast following it as my source of AI stuff called ML Street Talk, and they were talking about how much this book has you know, influenced their approach to finding different things around what they should do with machine learning and stuff like this. And it's this book by Kenneth Stanley, and I find their way of looking at things in which you do not have any sort of set objectives that might put some sort of maybe unwanted guidance into what you want to find, but look at the stepping stones and just move from one to another rather than actually looking at the last objective. Maybe that's a little bit, you know, it gives a little bit more freedom and a little bit more an approach which is much more serendipitous, if you want. So I thought I'll put
Thank you. That sounds very much like a challenge, as Martin has suggested, to follow the example of Amazon perhaps and experiment.
If I might there, Ben, I mean, I think there's a couple of types of innovation. You've got problem-driven innovation where you've got an actual problem. How do you apply things to fix that problem? So you've got an end goal in mind, and how do you get to? And there's the opposite sort, which is more sort of capability or technology led, that says we've got this ability to do something. What the hell might we do with it? Okay, and I think that sort of scenario would suit well the scenario you described there, Adrian, where you need to experiment and take incremental steps on what can this thing actually do, and how can A lead us to B, lead us to C. So you don't necessarily start with the problem, you start with the capability, and they're both perfectly valid. I think the problem is we apply the wrong one sometimes to the other.
Yeah, if I may add here, it's just that both authors are AI researchers, and they started looking at this from an AI problem. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah. So they've got a capability. What the hell do we do with that capability? Exactly. Yeah. So it's that sort of we've got a capability. What can we do with this? And that's a very different approach to we've got a problem. How do we solve it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all for setting aside this time to join us in this conversation. And thanks especially to Martin. Martin, you pointed out among the many lessons you shared with us, one which I just wanted to highlight in ending, which is the importance of paying it forward. And you have certainly paid it forward. And I'm extremely grateful to you for sharing 40 years worth. You must have started as a very, very young boy, 40 years worth of insight. And I'm also grateful to you for committing to carrying on the conversation. Should any of you wish to join us in that conversation, you'll find the invitation to become an Amity Parther in the chat. I'll make the chat available as well after the call. And do please pick up any part of this conversation you wish, especially if you can help identify the 95% of ways that didn't work, to help those of us paying close attention to find the 5% that really do transform.
Ben, I've dropped my email in the chat. Please connect on LinkedIn if there's anything you'd like to explore. I should have added, I do quite a lot of work with Imperial College and their venture ecosystem, work with lots of founders. So if I can help with anything, I will.
Very kind. Martin, thank you. And all of you, thank you very much for joining us, and keep in touch.
Bye all. Thanks for joining.
Yes, thanks, Martin. Bye.
Hi, Doug. Nice to see you. I'll end it there. Bye-bye.